So, today on The Explainer, we're going to dig into why we are all, well, just so bad at planning. And to do it, we're going to dive into a really personal and, frankly, kind of embarrassing story from the Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman himself. A story about one of his own projects that went completely, and I mean completely, off the rails.
You know the feeling, right? That big project at work you swore would take a week and it ends up taking a month. Or that weekend DIY project you thought was just a simple afternoon job. Why do our plans, big or small, almost always go over budget and way over time? Well, it's not just bad luck. There's a really powerful cognitive bias at play here.
Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1976. You've got this dream team of academics and seriously experienced teachers. Kahneman's right in there with them. And they set out to create this totally groundbreaking high school course. The goal was huge, but hey, these were the best people in the field. What could go wrong?
So a year goes by, they're meeting every hard day, and honestly, they've made some fantastic progress. They've got a detailed outline, a couple of chapters are already written, they've even tested some sample lessons. They're feeling good. They're in the zone. So they figure, okay, let's try and forecast when we'll actually be done. Everybody on the team writes down their estimate on a slip of paper. And the result? A really tight consensus. The team was super confident they could get the finished textbook delivered in about 2 years. The most pessimistic person in the room guessed 2.5 years. Seems pretty reasonable, right?
But then, this is the moment where everything changes. Kahneman has this little idea. He turns to the team's curriculum expert, a guy named Seymour Fox, and he asks him a question that sounds simple, but is actually profound. He says, "Hey, Seymour, thinking about all the other teams who've tried to do something like this, how long did it take them?"
And Seymour, he goes quiet. And when he finally speaks, the answer is just shocking. He says he couldn't think of a single similar team that had managed to finish in less than 7 years. Most, he said, took closer to 10. All of a sudden, their confident 2-year forecast looked completely and utterly delusional.
But wait, it gets even worse. Kahneman presses him a little more. Okay, of those teams you're thinking of, what percentage just gave up, never finished? The answer was a total gut punch, about 40% of them. 40% of the projects never even got finished at all. The team had never even considered that total failure was an option. For the final blow, Kahneman asks Seymour how their team stacked up. Surely they were better, right? More skilled? And Seymour hesitates, and then he admits, I think we're probably below average. And the most incredible part of this whole thing? This came as a total shock to everyone in the room, including Seymour himself. So what on earth just happened here? Well, the team was using what Kahneman would later call the inside view. They were focused only on their own specific plan, their own progress, their own talent. It's like they were looking at the detailed blueprint for their one building, and it all seemed so manageable and unique. What Kahneman forced Seymour to access was the outside view. And this means you totally ignore the special, unique details of your own project, and you just ask a simple question. What happened when other people tried to do this exact same thing? It's a reality check. It's based on cold, hard data, not your personal feelings. It gives you a statistical baseline. And this really gets to the heart of why we make this mistake. We are just psychologically wired to favor our own story, our vivid, personal, inside view. As Kahneman says, those cold, pallid statistics about strangers, they just don't feel real to us. So we might look at them, nod, and then just immediately toss them aside. This universal human flaw, it has a name. It's called the planning fallacy. It's our built-in tendency to be wildly optimistic, to plan for a perfect, best-case scenario while completely ignoring the statistical reality of how long things actually take and all the things that can and usually do go wrong. And in the real world, the consequences can be staggering. I mean, just look at the Scottish Parliament building. The initial estimate? £40 million. A couple years later, it's up to $109 million. By the time it was finally finished, the final cost had ballooned to £431 million, over 10 times the original budget. A classic and very, very expensive example of the planning fallacy. And it's not a one-off thing. A massive 30-year study of global rail projects found this exact same pattern. On average, the planners overestimated how many people would ride the trains by over 100%, and they underestimated the costs by 45%. And even though these failures were public knowledge, the forecasts never got any better. And of course, it happens to us too.
A survey found that American homeowners expected their kitchen remodel to cost, on average, about $18,000. The actual average? Almost $39,000, more than double. Why? Because our inside view just doesn't account for all those unknown unknowns that are bound to pop up.
Okay, so how do we fight this? How do we stop being so delusional? Well, according to the renowned planning expert Bent Flybier, the answer is crystal clear. The cure, the only cure for the planning fallacy, is to deliberately go out and find the outside view. He says it's the single most important thing you can do to make better forecasts, period. And this approach has been turned into a really practical method called reference class forecasting. It's a simple 3-step process. First, you find a group of similar past projects. That's your reference class. Second, you get the real data on what happened to them, how long they actually took, what they really cost. And finally, you use that data to create a realistic baseline for your own project. Which brings us all the way back to that fateful Friday afternoon in 1976. The team had just been slapped in the face with the devastating outside view, a 7 to 10-year timeline, and a 40% chance of complete and utter failure. So, what did they do? They ignored it. They just carried on as if nothing had happened. And the final outcome? The project took 8 years to complete, smack dab in the middle of the outside view's forecast. And by the time it was finally finished, the Ministry of Education had lost interest. The curriculum was never used. Kahneman's reflection on this moment is just so humbling. He admits they were faced with a very clear choice: either be rational and maybe quit, or just keep going with the project. And they chose to abandon rationality. That's the incredible power of the sunk cost fallacy and the magnetic pull of our own plans. So from this one epic failure, Kahneman learned 3 profound lessons that would go on to shape his entire career. First, that critical difference between our cozy inside view and the harsh outside view. Second, the seductive power of the planning fallacy. And third, the dangerous trap of what he calls irrational perseverance. But here is the most powerful lesson of all. Kahneman was already an expert on cognitive biases when this happened. He was literally co-writing the book on this stuff. Yet when the chips were down, he and his team fell right into the trap. Knowing about a bias isn't enough. It's not the same as beating it. You have to build systems to force yourself to look at the cold, hard facts. So we'll leave you with this question to chew on. Think about the biggest project on your plate right now. You've got your plan, right? That's your inside view. But take a moment, be really honest with yourself. What is the outside view? What do the statistics say? And more importantly, what are you doing to make sure you don't just ignore it?